Hey singers, Jeff Mathena here, actually in Colorado right now teaching a church workshop, and I wanted to send you another quick little vocal tip. Now the last couple videos that I've made for you, the first one was about warming up in the morning, some tips on how to get your voice to warm up properly. The second tip was about warming down in the evening as you are trying to get your voice to recover a little bit. But the reality is, I would be remiss if I didn't encourage you to focus on improving Monday through Saturday, working on your voice Monday through Saturday rather than just focusing on Sunday. So, imagine that you go and run a race and you're really unhappy with your time. It wouldn't make any sense for you to say, well, I'm going to sign up for another race. I'm not going to run it all leading up to that second race. I'm just going to try harder. It's probably going to lead to a pretty stressful experience as you're watching your time tick away, realizing you're not doing it any better. No, you're going to come up with a regimen for training so that you can be in better condition when it actually comes time for you to run that second race. And I think for a lot of worship leaders, it almost feels like running a race every single Sunday and constantly being unhappy with your time. So then the question becomes, well, what can I do Monday through Saturday in order to get better? And ultimately, you need a vocal regimen, right? So you need to go through some vocal exercises on a daily basis that are designed to get your voice to align with the way that God designed it. And there really is a way that the voice is designed to work, much in the same way that there's a way that a piano or a guitar or any other instrument are designed to be played. And that really leads me to the point that I wanted to make in this video, the tip that I wanted to give you in this video. The question is, as you are going through vocal exercises, and of course, I recommend you do the work to go find a reliable regimen, a reliable methodology. Again, that's part of the reason that I created the Unhindered Voice podcast, was to provide a starting point for a lot of you out there. But the important thing to understand is, as you're going through that regimen, you have to constantly evaluate whether you are using your voice properly or whether you're actually making progress. Now, when it comes to playing an instrument, let's say electric guitar, you have this instrument in your hand, you play the instrument, and then actually the way that you play is very heavily influenced by what you hear coming out of the amplifier that's somewhere else in the room, right? And what you hear coming out of the amp is actually the same that everybody else is hearing. So there is this sort of somewhat objective way that you can actually evaluate your own guitar playing. When it comes to your voice, though, the way that you experience your voice is actually completely different than the way that everybody else experiences it. In fact, if you've ever heard a recording of yourself speaking, for most of you out there, it's probably kind of an unsettling experience, because all of a sudden you realize the sound that you hear in your head is not the same thing that everybody else is hearing. In fact, what most singers are doing when they are trying to get better, they're trying to figure out how to sing better. They get into this cycle. They start singing, they listen to the sound in their own head, they decide whether they like it, and they adjust until it ends up sounding like the sound that they're really striving for. So there's this constant cycle of singing, listening, critiquing, and adjusting. And it never actually leads you to the voice that you really want. And the reason that it never leads you to that voice is simply because the sound that you hear in your head is not what everybody else hears. And if you're pursuing a type of tone or a sound that you prefer, a sound that you admire, that's probably heavily influenced by what you hear when you listen to other singers. And it's important to realize that what those singers hear when they are singing inside their head is different than what you're hearing out here. So you are actually emulating the wrong sound, and you're basing the sound that you're striving for, whether you're actually achieving that sound off of faulty information because you're listening to the sound in your head rather than what everybody else is listening to. Confusing, but also makes total sense, right? And so then you have to ask, how in the world can we ever verify whether we are actually singing with proper technique? And the answer is you have to focus more on what you feel. All right, so you have 3 primary sections to your voice. You have the respirator, your lungs. You have the phonator, or your vocal cord. So air comes up, passes through the vocal cords, oscillates hundreds of times per second, and that produces tone. And then that sound is carried up into your head. And the head is where all of the resonation occurs, right? It's the resonating body for your instrument. And we evaluate the quality of any given instrument based on, largely, how well it resonates. So at the end of the day, let's just take something really simple like humming. If I was gonna hum a 5-tone scale, and I go, now if I'm basing it off of sound, and I'm trying to figure out, well, am I humming that the right way? I'm going to be subject to whatever my bias tonal preference is inside of my own head. And it may be a good preference, it may be a bad preference. But if I'm focusing on what I feel, and I think about feeling vibration on my lips and vibration on my nose and around my eyes, it's going to lead me to go, instead of, right? Instead of going ma 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 ma, I'm going to go ma 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 ma. I'm using my voice intentionally in a way that resonates better, and I'm evaluating how it's resonating based on the vibration that I feel on a physical level. And here's really the closing point. The majority of singers that I work with that have real problems with their voices focus way too much on what they hear. They're in that cycle of singing, listening, critiquing, and adjusting, and it never actually working. On the other hand, singers that I work with that have amazing, flawless voices, the kind of people that you admire and at the same time are kind of frustrated with a lot of times because they just sing and it feels like they can do no wrong. The reason they are that way is because they focus on what their voice feels like. They even focus on how their voice makes them feel on an emotional level. And when they find the right feeling, when it feels when the physical sensations align with what they believe should be the case, it's almost as if they assume that their voice sounds right. And what you will find if you start approaching your voice that way, if you start actually evaluating your voice according to how well it is resonating, and you actually record yourself doing exercises or singing songs in a way that yields more resonance than what you typically feel or how you might typically approach that song, I think you're going to be pleasantly surprised with the sound that you actually hear. And again, this is something you have to experiment with and work with Monday through Saturday or in between services rather than waiting until Sunday morning. That's the biggest encouragement I can give you, and it's something that I know will pay off when you put in the work with an effective regimen, evaluating your voice in a way that actually is effective.